Hello everyone, it's Dr. Manjiri Nadkarni, Ayurvedic MD, registered holistic nutritionist, back today for day 57 of 100 days of Ayurveda. So, we are talking about some different topics in Ayurveda for the past 57 days. So, it's day 57, super excited about it. And I've been trying to have discussions around different foods and healing foods or doshas or whatever topics or whatever it is that people require to understand, right? So I'm getting a lot of feedback and I'm trying to discuss different things. So if you are live here, just put a comment so I can see that you're live. I can see Uttamji, I can see Ushaji. Thank you for tuning in live. If you are watching this as a replay, you can always post a hashtag as replay, right? So I'll start with today's topic. So today we are going to discuss all about plant-based milks. Yesterday we discussed milk. We were discussing about raw milk versus pasteurized milk. We discussed a lot about cow milk. Is it good? Is it bad for you? So I just wanted to highlight a few points from yesterday. Hi, Jocelyn. Nice to see you. Thanks for tuning in live. So when we talk about the vitality of the body, when we talk about ojas, right, in Ayurveda, cow milk is attributed to have ojas like properties, right? And because cow milk is something that in olden days was not processed. Nowadays it's factory, almost like factory manufactured, where you're having cows, stick to each other, they have no movement, nothing, and they're injected with hormones. But it was very different in the olden days, and it's very different if you know a farmer that takes good care of cows, or because it is a whole substance in nature, it's a whole food in nature. So when we talk about plant-based milks, nothing really compares. So yesterday there was a question that what can I do instead of cow milk, as an ojas building food. So, and the best alternative to cow milk, in my opinion, is goat milk, which is easier to digest. If you're reacting to cow milk, you could have goat milk. That's an easier option. And yeah, so, but nut milks are a completely different story, right? Nut milks are not traditional milks. So basically, whether it's coconut milk or it's almond milk or it's cashew milk, they're all nuts that have been soaked in water. You take the skin out and you blend those, right? And when you're blending those, you're going to strain those, and then you're going to have something which is like a cloudy milk, like it looks like milk, but technically it's not a milk, right? It's more watery, it's more water based. So I wanted to discuss a few things about milk and what other challenges are going on. And typically, like when we talk about these milks, when you talk about almond as nutrition, when you talk about coconut, nutrition from a coconut, when you talk about um, cashews and the nutrition, it's very different than the nut milk or the coconut milk, or so it's going to be different. So a few reasons why people try a non-dairy milk or milk alternative is because they could be lactose intolerant, or they could have a milk allergy, as I described yesterday. They could be reacting to either whey or casein in the milk, and sometimes they don't like to taste milk, right? But they need something creamy for either cooking or for their coffee. Some of them have a vegan lifestyle and a vegan diet where they don't want any products derived from any kind of animals. Sometimes they could have issues with hormones. Sometimes they could have issues with certain growths in the body, and yesterday we also mentioned that milk has certain growth like factors. So if you have any tumors or excess growth in the body, try to avoid milk. Certain people switch over to nut milks because they have inflammatory bowel conditions, right? So sometimes if they have inflammatory bowel conditions, a lot of inflammation in the bowels, milk proteins can trigger reactions, or lactose can also trigger reactions. And sometimes they're just worried that there's a lot of antibiotics in the milk, or pesticides in the milk, or hormones pumped, or for different ethical reasons. So there are different reasons why somebody has tried or somebody is trying plant based milks So if you're watching this live, I have a question for you. Which plant based milk have you tried so far? Have you tried coconut milk? Have you tried almond milk? Have you tried soy milk, cashew milk, oats milk, hemp milk? So, which plant based milk have you tried so far? And if you could also let me know the reason of switching over from any kind of dairy protein to a non dairy protein, right? So, you can let me know about those. Why have you made that switch? Just gonna tune off my computer. Okay. Yeah. So if you can let me know why have you made that switch from one kind of milk to the other. So Usha ji and Uttam ji are saying none. Okay. Swati is saying almond milk. Okay. And is there a reason you made the switch over to almond milk? So that's the one thing I would love to know. That is there a reason that you've made the switch to almond milk? So okay, not completely switched. Okay, yeah, no problem. So I was just trying to get an idea of, what's going on, what are different people trying. And let's talk about the nutritional comparison, right? So when we compare everything to a cup of whole fat cow milk, right? So oat milk has almost as many calories, that's what they're saying, and I'm looking at different sources, right? And then some of them have fat added. All of these are low in sugar as compared to um, your milk. All of those are also lower in protein, right? And they're lower in sodium. Some of them are fortified with calcium, so they don't have calcium of their own. They don't have a lot of potassium of their own, but almond milk, flax milk, so different kinds of milks have been fortified, right? And a lot of people believe that dairy milks actually have lower calories, have less fat, with the exception of coconut milk, have more water content. They also have less protein. So the answer to most questions is that, okay, there's a huge difference between having nuts and having nut based milks, right? And that's what I'm going to talk about. And if you are looking at any of nut milks, coconut milk is rich in fat, but if you're looking at it from a protein perspective, if you're looking at it from a nourishment perspective, if you're looking at it from a perspective you're wanting to give it to your kids, who are in that growing stage or who've just stopped breastfeeding, and you're looking for an alternative, these do not compare to cow milk or goat milk because they don't nearly have as many nutrients, and they don't have the what we call ojas or the vital force, and they also are more processed, right? So they're processed. So these are a few different things. Now if you are reacting to milk and you don't have an option, right, you want it for your beverages, maybe your coffee or tea, but you cannot drink milk and cow milk, it's totally fine, but don't look at it that it's a nutrient for you, right? Don't look at it from perspective that you're getting a lot of nutrition from it, and I'm going to be discussing that. So I'm just going to look at a few of the comments. So Jocelyn is saying she's tried soy, almond, cashew, coconut, and she uses mostly almond milk. She has dairy intolerance. Okay. Ankita is saying she's tried almond, coconut, cashew milk, switched due to breakouts due to leaky gut. However, yeah, so these also have gum added and they have a lot of different additives. So if you buy any kind of store bought milk, they have lots of preservatives and additives, and they're not as healthy as they're packaged, right? And the thing is, when you are adding nutrients, even if you fortify it with calcium, how absorbable is the calcium from the milk? That is another big question, right? So Ankita is saying that she's making her own nut milk at home, and because her husband is sensitive to lactose, so that is actually the way to go. So if you are ever interested in getting any plant-based milks, always try to make your own, right? So that is a good question, Uttamji, and that's what I was going to talk about. So if you are looking from a nutrition perspective, if you're looking from a healing perspective, if you're looking from a brain development or a brain strengthening perspective, when we look at nuts, right? So peanuts are a different category, but most nuts, when we look at almonds or cashews, coconut, so a lot of nuts are said to be sattvic and also ojas building in Ayurveda. So when you have almonds, maybe you have a handful of almonds, maybe 6 to 8, right? You soak them overnight, you take the skin off, and you chew them really well and you eat them. They serve as an amazing brain food, right? But when you're buying a carton of almond milk from the grocery store, probably the entire carton has 2 almonds. So you're not getting the protein, you're not getting the nutrients from the almond itself. And because it's been diluted so much, you're not getting a lot of the benefits. So another option is, if you are still interested in making your own milk, you can always make it at home, right? If you still want to go for that milk, always make it at home. And if you can, try to have those nuts, right? But also remember that these nuts are packed with nutrients, right? These nuts are also heavy to digest. So in Ayurveda, when we talk about gunas, right? So nuts are slightly sweet tasting. They have a sweet post digestive effect, but they are warming in potency. So if you have too many almonds, or if you have too many cashews, or if you have too many walnuts, Brazil nuts, whatever it is, right? They have amazing amounts of fiber, they have amazing amounts of everything else, but they're heavy to digest. So having even almond butter by spoonfuls is not the best option. So when you're having nut milk, you're not having as many almonds, you're not having as many cashews, because you're looking for minimum requirements, right? And these nuts, when I talk about almonds or cashews, they are warming in nature. Coconut, on the other hand, is cooling in nature, right? So when we look at different nut milks, because they are liquid, almost watery, if you serve them warm, they can help balance the vata dosh, right? So anything that's watery, that's more liquid, when you warm it up, right, that will help with balancing the vata dosh because of the water content in it and the warmth of it. But you're not going to get a lot of nutrients. So if you're looking from a nutrient perspective to nourish your vata dosh, right? If you are somebody who doesn't have lots of calcium in the body, or you are really weak because you don't have a lot of nutrients, then the milk is not really going to help you, right? So these are like my takes on it. And when we talk about coconut milk, coconut is sweet tasting, it's oily, it's heavy, right? But it's also cooling in nature as opposed to the other milks. So in the olden days, and I've seen that back in India as well. So whenever my mom would cook, so there are a lot of recipes where you take a fresh coconut, a brown coconut, you'll break it into 2 pieces. You'll take all the pulp and you'll actually scrape the pulp and blend it. And then you'll extract the milk out of it. And there are lots of recipes. I belong to Goa. Like my dad came from, Goa. I've always lived in Mumbai all my life, but my native is Goa. So a lot of cultural cuisine, a lot of the food that I ended up eating was lots of coconut curries. And lots of traditional foods are made with coconut milk, right? Whether you're making like a curry, whether you're making any kind of sweets, you make it with coconut milk, and you always extract fresh milk from the coconut, right? So you'll scrape the coconut, you'll extract the fresh milk from the coconut, and you can even drink it, or you can have it for cooking. And coconut milk is much richer than coconut water is, right? Coconut water has more of the sugar content or natural sugars because of the sweetness. Coconut milk has much more fat content, right? So if you are somebody who is a pitta type, who has a lot of heat issues going on, don't go for cashew milks. Cashews are most warming if you compare it with almonds and other nuts. You can always go for coconut milk then. If you have a kapha type, you can definitely go for a bit of almond milk or a little bit of cashew milk, but in moderation, and vatas can have it, right? Because not from a nourishment perspective, but from a substitute perspective. So let's get back to soy milk, right? So I've covered a little bit about almond, cashew, and coconut. right? So let's get talking about soy milk. So soy is again a big controversial topic, as I mentioned yesterday. So soy is a heavier to digest food, right? So it's not something that's very easy to digest. When we talk about different foods and we talk about, the lightness or the heaviness of food, soy typically is heavy to digest, and it's also a bit drying to the body, right? So it's not something that's very oily, and it's something that's very heavy. And it also has things called phytic acid or phytates. So these are known as the anti-nutrients, right? So when you talk about certain beans and legumes, right? So beans have something called phytic acid or phytates. They also have some lectins, right? And these are anti-nutrients in your bean, and they're actually designed to ward off any insects or animals who might eat the bean. So for the bean to survive, because the bean is going to kind of sprout and give rise to another plant, to protect the beans, the nature puts in toxic anti-nutrients known as phytic acid. So this phytic acid in the soy does not go away easily by washing, right? Or even boiling or cooking, which you look at the other legumes. If you look at maybe like mung beans, or if you look at different kind of lentils, when you soak it, you wash it off, the phytic acid can go away quickly. Or if you sprout it, it can go away quickly. One of my favorite tips to use beans, legumes, is always soak them with a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, right? The acid helps get rid of the phytic acid or the phytates and makes it more digestible, makes it less gassy. But with soy, what they found is it doesn't go away as easily unless you ferment it. And again, there are different schools of thoughts. Some of even the Ayurvedic practitioners think soy milk is fantastic because it has a lot of amino acids. It's almost a complete protein. Whereas the other school of thought is that because it's heavier to digest, try to avoid soy, right? As I mentioned yesterday, I interviewed an MD who was on the board of physicians, in US, and he absolutely loves soy milk, and he almost, recommends soy to everyone, and he thinks they're really good for balancing your own estrogen and detoxifying your body. But there are all these different opinions about soy. My own perspective is if you use it in moderation, it's fine. Try to get fermented soy. So miso is like a paste that you can buy which has fermented soy. Fermented is easier to digest, but at the same time in Ayurveda, fermented ends up becoming tamasic and rajasic, right? So it can either make your mind a little bit dull or more excited, so that depends. So that's why I would not recommend a lot of soy, right? So soy has, these phytates that I talked about, and these can actually bind to your minerals like zinc or calcium or magnesium, iron and copper, and may also strip it from your body. And that's why you could have mineral deficiencies, right? And phytates also block the absorption of nutrients from soy. So usually if you're getting certain nutrients from the soybean itself, because of these phytates, you're not going to be able to pick it up, right? So that's what we're talking about. And protein usually works well. So when we talk about soy protein, it can work well for some people who are vegetarian and who rely on vegetarian food, and for women who have issues with thyroid. So if you have a low functioning thyroid, or if you are a hypothyroid, or if you are a subclinical hypothyroid where everything is fine on your numbers but you are always cold and clammy, or you have lack of concentration, you're constipated, you're extremely tired, your hair is falling out in bunches. So these are all signs of thyroid. And soy also has certain goitrogens, and soy actually inhibits the uptake of iodine from your thyroid gland, right? So that's something to remember. So if you have a lot of soy milk, when you have thyroid issues, it's not going to be the best option for you, right? So this is just a heads up. And then there are two main, what they call isoflavone molecules in soy, right? Called genistein and diadzine. So these to, one of that inhibits the synthesis of estradiol or estrogen, right? So some of them say that, it helps with estrogen, some of them says it clears estrogen, and there is definitely lots of controversy on the whole soy piece. When you look at the Asian world, a lot of tempeh or a lot of soy is actually processed and fermented to make it easier to digest, right? So in the Eastern world or in India, we don't use a lot of soy just because it's difficult to digest, right? So this is the take. So I'm giving you both sides to the story. It might sound a bit confusing, but if you are a vegan and if you really want some protein from somewhere, buy fermented soy, right? If you are looking for milks, maybe choose another milk like almond milk, cashew milk, or coconut milk instead of soy milk, right? And if you are still wanting soy milk, always buy non-GMO, right? Always buy the one that has not been genetically modified, right? So this is important to understand. This is really important to note that whenever you buy milk, whenever you buy any foods, you always try and buy those which are non-GMO or not genetically modified, right? So I'm just going to look over my notes for one more minute. And does anybody have any questions? Any questions so far? So oats is another grain, right? So oats milk is another common one where you can just soak the oats overnight and you can blend those, right? And the same process is done for most nut milks, or you have to soak whatever you're making the milk from, whether it's hemp, whether it's oats, whether it's different nuts, or if you're making it from flaxseed, you literally soak it overnight. You change the water, you blend it with maybe like 10 parts of water or 4 parts of water, depending on how thick you want the milk to be. And then you will strain it, right? So when you strain it, you're taking all the fiber out. So if you are looking from a nutrient perspective, the best option is to have those nuts by themselves, but have not more than a handful of nuts at a time, because they're extremely nutrient dense. They're also oily, and if you have a weak digestive fire, you're not going to digest those nuts. And what I also see is sometimes, these nuts can be pretty allergenic, right? So I had someone who would have lots of almonds. She would snack on almonds all the time, and she ended up reacting to almonds after some time. So she couldn't have any almonds, and she ended up reacting to a lot of almonds after some time, right? So it's extremely important to understand what you're looking for. It's extremely important to understand, what are you requiring, right? So any questions? So I did cover the need for nut milks. So, and the one other point I wanted to make was, if you are looking at different kind of, um, milk options, because of there could be a protein allergy, right? As I mentioned yesterday, so you could react to whey or casein, or you could have a lactose intolerance. And lactose intolerance typically is not an actual allergy. Your immune is not getting triggered. It's more of a reaction because you don't have the enzyme lactase, which helps break down lactose. That's the milk sugar, right? So it's not a true allergy or it's not a true intolerance. It's actually more like a deficiency. And lactose intolerance, what I have seen in my practice is once you start healing your gut, whether it's lactose intolerance or whether it's any of those reactions or intolerances to proteins within the milk like whey or casein, you end up recovering from those, and you can start slowly adding those foods back in your diet, right? So this is a little bit about the scoop on plant-based milks. A few things we covered are they're not nearly as nutrient dense as the claims are. The way they are marketed to be the best things and provide an alternative, if you're looking from a nutritional perspective, they're not a direct substitute for growing children. If your child is eating solid food, if your child is eating, meat and or even a vegan protein, if your child can eat actual food, right, then you don't have to worry about it. But if you're looking at a child, who's relying on milk, and if you're making a substitute of a nut milk, it's not the best option, right? So these are a few things. The best way to have nut milks is to make it at your home. Also, make sure you're sterilizing the mason jar. I always recommend my clients to store the nut milk in glass jars and sterilize it. You can put it put it in the dryer and let it heat up and warm up. And so in that sterile jar, then the milk can stay fresh for a long time. When you refrigerate it, it ends up becoming pretty heavy. So always drink it warm. Don't drink it cold, right? That's the other option. And if you can have the nuts by themselves, that's a better option. Now, for anybody who's a vata type, even when you're having nuts, try to soak those nuts, right? Especially almonds also take the skin off because they will be much more digestive, right? And for coconut milk, a lot of the times you have no choice but to buy the traditional, cartons or the cans of milk. But if you can get a fresh coconut, always, you can kind of strike it. And if it has like a nice sound, I can't even describe the sound, but that's how you look for a coconut. You'll take like a brown coconut and you'll just like shake it vigorously to make sure there's water inside. And then you make sure there are no cracks on it. And then if you kind of just, I don't even know how to say that, like maybe, yeah, so you just hit it with your nail and it makes like a nice loud sound. So that's how you know the coconut is fresh and it's not rancid. The other thing is when you are making nut milks, always store your nuts as well as seeds in the refrigerator or in a cool, dark place. Whenever you talk about any foods that contain natural oils, they could get rancid. So whether it's your walnuts or almonds or cashews, if you store them in a warm place, right, there could be chances, or a humid place, there could be chances of them catching mold or the oils getting rancid. So always store them in a cool, dry place. You can also store them in the refrigerator for them to have a longer shelf life, right? So these are a few things I tried to discuss about nut milks. Tomorrow I'm going to discuss about other dairy products. So tomorrow is going to be a lot more about yogurt. We'll be discussing about ghee, clarified ghee and butter. And we'll be talking about the differences. We are also going to talk about like yogurt versus buttermilk tomorrow, and how to make your own buttermilk and which one's more appetizing, and the probiotic content of yogurt, and whether to make your own yogurt or to buy the store-bought yogurt. So we'll be discussing a lot about yogurt tomorrow. If we have time, we can go on to ghee and butter. If not, I'll continue that for Friday, right? So these are a few things I wanted to discuss. Again, tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the evening, I have a free webinar coming up. It's known as Eat Right for Your Body Type. I'm going to talk about Ayurvedic diet. I'm going to talk about what exactly to eat for your body type and how to thrive, and a lot of the myths that the food industry talks about when it comes to weight loss. And we are going to bust those myths and try to understand a lot about our own metabolisms and how to make the food that you're eating actually work for you, right? So I've posted the link in the comment section. Please feel free to join me for the webinar. It's a live webinar. You can ask me any questions. Sharp 4 o'clock tomorrow evening. And then I'll be back here at 8:30 to discuss yogurt, to discuss the probiotics or the probiotic content of yogurt, and buttermilk as well, and what are the differences. So that's what we're going to discuss tomorrow. Today's session wasn't super lengthy. I tried to keep it fairly simple. If you need any more information on nut milks and the nutrient profiles or the proteins, feel free to connect with me and I can share the resources with you, right? So that's the one thing I can definitely do. But any of the nut milks, don't nearly have as much nutrition as the actual nuts. So if you're looking them as a beverage or as a substitute, go ahead, but don't fall into the nutrient trap thinking that they're extremely nutritious and you have to do it, right? So when it comes to food, always try to buy things that are found in nature, right? When you process things too much, um, nuts are found in nature, but when you're making a nut milk and when you're adding different things, right? And there are some additives that are added in like soy milk or almond milk, which are not even good for you, right? So there are lots of artificial, sometimes sugars added, right? To make them taste better, or there are lots of gums added, or there are different stabilizers added, which could increase the toxic load in your body. So again, the rule of the thumb is if you can't pronounce it, right? If you're looking at the ingredient list, if you can't pronounce it, don't buy it. It's not going to help you, it's not going to support your body. So always have natural foods, always try to use and explore your body's intelligence, and also try to connect with how you feel when you eat a certain food, right? And nuts can serve as an amazing food, but snacking on too many nuts is again, going to create a lot of heaviness in your body as well, especially for kapha types, right? If you are a vata type, soak the nuts, 100% have those. With pittas, you have to be slightly aware because most of them are warming, right? But coconut milk, if you're using them for cooking, it's definitely okay. Even almond flour, right? So I do make some sweets like chocolate fudge from almond flour, but again, it sits extremely heavy in your tummy, right? Because it is a heavy food. So you have to be conscious about it. And if something is heavy, then you have to reduce the quantity of your intake, right? So that's a few things. These are a few things to keep in mind. So I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock for the webinar, and then I'll see you all back here at 8:30. We're going to discuss yogurt and probiotics. So I'll keep that for today. So thank you, Kalpen and Sejal. Thanks, Uttamji. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in live. And tomorrow is the big day. Yeah, the webinar. So join me, and also join me for the evening session tomorrow. Thanks. Have a fantastic night. And thank you, Ushaji. Thanks, and have a fantastic night. And I will see you all tomorrow. Bye for now.